The number one thing that'll trigger a dismissive avoidant into deactivation and then the eventual discard of a romantic partner is something that signifies that the relationship is real. Early on in the relationship, it's not a real relationship, at least not emotionally, to the avoidant. It's what's called the shared fantasy. That's because it's a romance novel, it's a fairy tale, it's a rom-com, but it's not real. The dismissive avoidant or fearful avoidant that leans heavily dismissive is riding the dopamine high of infatuation. They're on cloud nine with you. You're giving them all sorts of validation, and they are absolutely loving it. Dopamine is the reward hormone, and it also can mask insecurities. So they haven't been triggered yet, and those insecurities are lying dormant. The dismissive avoidant thinks that you are the answer to all their problems, that you are the right person that has come along, that is finally going to fix them, and they're going to be able to engage in a relationship with. And they are just riding that dopamine and pouring out all of these bottled up, suppressed emotions onto you. And it feels great. You feel like you have a connection and a chemistry that's out of this world. But then the relationship progresses. Dopamine levels start to come down because the brain simply cannot maintain that elevated level of dopamine forever. Now, the avoidance insecurities are starting to bubble up to the surface. And things will happen that signify that it's a real relationship. Emotional closeness will naturally build as the relationship progresses. There will be further advancements in commitment, and there might even be some disagreements. Maybe you meet their family, they meet yours. Your family loves them and their family loves you. And that uncle makes a comment, oh, the two of you would make beautiful babies together. Or the two of you really seem like you're a good fit. Something that signifies that it is real. Now, those insecurities that have been bubbling up are getting triggered. Dismissive avoidants have a very specific set of insecurities, and these insecurities stem from consistent childhood emotional neglect. This is a person that grew up in a stable household most of the time, but their emotional needs were not met. They weren't given that love and nurturing, and they didn't have a safe space to talk about feelings. Their feelings were rejected and dismissed. So they never had anybody show them how to process emotions or how to deal with stress. And they personalized that lack of love that they received as a child. Growing up to feel defective is a wound of shame, like something's wrong with them. So healthy, normal relationship behaviors, especially ones that coincide with an advancing relationship, trigger them. Emotional intimacy is very triggering. It triggers every single nerve, and their limbic system is on fire with anxiety because subconsciously they associate emotional intimacy, closeness, with rejection. Because of that wound of shame, their subconscious fear is if I lower my walls and I let my partner in, my partner's gonna figure me out and I'll be exposed as being defective and I'll get rejected. That's also why they fear commitment. And even though they can commit, it really triggers them and they withdraw. That's because when you commit to somebody, it's implied that you have to be vulnerable with the person that you're committed to, that you have to be open, no walls. If you're in a committed relationship, you're supposed to have emotional closeness. And since emotional closeness equates to rejection in the mind of the dismissive avoidant, commitment also equals rejection. The caveat is they can much more easily commit to a partner that's emotionally unavailable since there's no threat of emotional intimacy with that person. The unavailable partner has their walls up, so the dismissive avoidant can keep their walls up too. That commitment isn't triggering. But with an emotionally available partner, the advancement of the relationship is very triggering. Any kind of disagreements or conflicts are very triggering to them too, and they're part of a normal advancing relationship. You're never going to see eye to eye on everything, but as a child, the dismissive avoidant had their feelings rejected. So even the slightest disagreement triggers them with anxiety, and they associate it with rejection, and they shut down even at the slightest conflict. And in their mind, because of that fear, to justify that fear, they rationalize it as, well, we had a disagreement, therefore we are incompatible. Any kind of expectations that coincide with a healthy advancing relationship are also very triggering to them. Typically, dismissive avoidance also had a very demanding parent or parents with very high expectations on them as a child. Expectations that they struggled to meet. So they feel like even the bare minimum of expectations in a relationship is insurmountable to them, that they won't be able to meet those expectations and they'll ultimately disappoint their partner, get exposed for being defective, and get rejected. So the relationship is advancing. It seems like it's going well, but the fact that it's advancing and going well is ultimately the trigger because now it's real. It's not a fantasy anymore. So the avoidant, in order to justify their fears and avoid self-reflection, which means confronting that inner shame, their mind is almost instinctively wired to project the responsibility of their fears and their insecurities onto their partner. So if it becomes their partner's fault, they don't have to self-reflect, they don't have to take accountability, which means they don't have to face that inner shame. So they'll justify it and rationalize it by saying, look, we're just incompatible. This person likes Italian food and I don't, we're incompatible. This person wants a white house to live in and I want a blue house. See, we're incompatible. They will find even the tiniest little differences of opinion or differences in the two personalities and justify it as to why it's the other person's fault so they can avoid taking accountability. And the way that they've learned to protect themselves is to shut down and essentially block off emotions, to suppress their feelings. So the remaining feelings that they have for their partner, they will suppress them and bury them, and they won't allow themselves to access those feelings. So when they do end the relationship, it's usually a brutal discard with no empathy and no emotion, stone cold eyes, because they're completely detached from that emotion. They blocked out all empathy and they're solely focused on themselves to keep themselves as what they perceive themselves to be as safe. Essentially, due to that emotional neglect in childhood, they grew up with really only the capacity and the desire to focus on themselves, meaning whatever it is that they perceive they want, need, feel, or fear, they prioritize because they learned that the only person that'll ever look out for them is them. So when this discard happens, and usually because the relationship is going well and advancing, it's real, they can be so cold and shut down, it feels like they never cared for you at all. It's not that they didn't care for you, they cared for you to their capacity, but due to those walls, those difficulties that they have truly bonding, oxytocin bonding, and really developing lasting emotional intimacy, they were never really able quite to get there the way that you were with them. And that makes it so much easier for them to shut down and push a partner away. It is their insecurities, their attachment wounds. It's not your fault. It doesn't mean that you were a bad partner, that you weren't lovable. It doesn't mean you weren't enough for this person. Deep down, they felt they weren't enough to keep you, which is why they shut down, deactivated, pushed you away, and blamed you to avoid their inner shame and avoid what their subconscious mind believes to be as inevitable rejection from you.